Some men say the earth is round, and some men say it is flat. But if it is round, could a decree of the Parliament flatten it? And if it is flat, could the king's command make it round? Now these words were uttered by St. Thomas More in defense of himself at his trial for high treason, the charge being the refusal to acknowledge that the king was the head of the church on earth. He was making this argument to the jury. We all know the outcome. He lost the case and his head was separated from the rest of his body. But when he was making this argument to the jury, he was not only appealing to their common sense. Of course the Parliament couldn't make a round earth flat. And of course the king couldn't make a flat earth round. He was also appealing to the jurors' understanding of the natural law, of the order of things, of the laws of nature and nature's God. He knew what Aristotle and Augustine had written. He could anticipate what Thomas Aquinas and John Locke and Thomas Jefferson would write in arguing that in the order of things, government has natural restraints on it. It can't change the shape of the earth. It also can't take away our natural liberties. This argument is called the natural law. The argument is that our liberties, our freedoms don't come from the government. They come from our humanity. And our humanity is a gift from God. And as God is perfectly free, so we are perfectly free. And the liberties that we have are ours by virtue of our existence. And the government doesn't give them, and the government can't take them away whenever it wants, because it wants to exert its power over us. Now,
yeah. Yes.
Question. How did the king and the Parliament on an island 3,000 miles away from here know whether or not every piece of paper in your house bore the image of the king? Answer. Parliament enacted the Townshend Acts, and the Townshend Acts permitted British soldiers to write their own search warrants, and they would literally show up at your front door and hand you a piece of paper on which they had written authorization for themselves to enter your home, ostensibly to look for the stamps. But of course, once there, they might confiscate alcohol, they might confiscate furniture, they might even confiscate the house by kicking you out and taking over the house. This was the last straw. The Stamp Act was so odious that Parliament actually rescinded it before the Revolution, but the damage was done. We fought a revolution. We won the revolution. We wrote a constitution. We added to the Constitution a Bill of Rights to assure ourselves and our posterity that what the king and the Parliament did to us as colonists, the new government in Washington would never do to us as Americans. This was not an easy task. In the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, they had a great debate about the form of the government. The most fundamental debate they had was, where does freedom come from? And James Madison made the Jeffersonian argument, the natural law argument, that our rights come from our humanity. There was a big government crowd even in those days, personified by Alexander Hamilton. And his argument was, without the government there can be no freedom. The government protects freedom. And there are times when the government can restrict freedom in order to make its job easier to protect us. Fortunately, the natural law argument, the Jeffersonian argument, the one that Thomas More unsuccessfully made to the jury, the one that Jefferson made in the Declaration of Independence, carried the day. Now, these weren't just Jefferson's musings. When he wrote, all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he is wedding America for all time to the understanding of the natural law. Think about it. Endowed by our Creator, not by the government, by our Creator, with certain inalienable, inseparable, they come from our existence, rights. And among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The same argument that he made in 1776 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence would be reincorporated in the Bill of Rights in 1787. The Constitution was only sent by the Constitutional Convention to the 13 colonies with the promise that there would soon follow a Bill of Rights, so that the new government, the new federal government, which would be built in Washington, D.C., would never be able to do to us what the King and the Parliament had done to us when we were colonists. And so the Bill of Rights is enacted unanimously by a voice vote by the Congress and adopted unanimously by each one of the states. And once they hit the 9th state, 3/4 of the then 13, it becomes part of the law of the land. And it basically takes the natural law and says the government may not interfere with it. Now, everybody knows this phrase. Congress shall make no law abridging the, I'll tell you why I emphasize the in a minute, freedom of speech. Think about it. It doesn't say Congress shall grant freedom of speech. It says Congress shall not infringe the freedom of speech. Why the? Because the framers understood that the freedom of speech existed before the Congress did, existed before the country did, exists wherever human beings go, because it comes from our humanity. And so when they wrote the Bill of Rights, they put down on a piece of paper the things that we were supposed to take for granted. So your right to think as you wish, to say what you think, to publish what you say, your right to worship or not to worship, your right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, your right to defend yourself, to keep and bear arms, which has nothing to do with hunting, which says you can shoot at the government when it is taken over by tyrants.
Yes.
And next to the right to life, the greatest right there is, the right to be left alone. These rights are written down in the Bill of Rights and are guaranteed against interference by the government.